Influence with Skill program. This program is designed to increase your ability to be influential in the day-to-day interactions of your work. Why, I think, is answered in many ways, but perhaps the simplest is that the World Bank Group is a flat, complex organization that requires strong networks and relationships in order for individuals to be successful. Your ability to be influential in those networks and with those relationships is critical to your success. It's also important to think of what is it that actually influences us on an ongoing basis. We know from social science and behavioral economic research that there are many factors that influence us at an unconscious level. Simply holding a hot or cold beverage has an impact on how we perceive those around us, perceiving people as warm when we hold a hot beverage and cold or distant when we hold cold beverages. Counting money versus counting paper has also an influence on us. In an interesting set of research, it shows that by counting money instead of paper, we can become more impervious to pain and also trigger in some ways the pleasure centers of our brain, and we'll eat more chocolates or sweets after we count money versus counting paper. Researchers speculate that money connects to the power and pleasure centers of the brain. It's important to count it, not just think about it, though, for this influence to occur. Many of us have heard the broken window theory of crime that proposes that even a small act of crime, unacknowledged, begins to signal that laws are not important. We're also inspired by individuals around us. We're inspired by individual acts of courage, generosity, and humility. Other emotions begin to influence us as well, and fear is a well-known path. We constantly see media and politicians using fear to mobilize collective energy and interest and move us to action in the direction they'd like to see. So what influences us? There are many factors that have an influence on us at conscious and unconscious levels. The context in which we find ourselves related to power positions, even our own levels of confidence, the familiarity of a situation or circumstances in which we find ourselves influence us, and our habits that evolve over time. We know that emotions play a strong role in influencing our behavior, and our desire to belong, a real kind of evolutionary trait that has us modify our behavior to fit in. Our own physical body sensations guide us, and the specific behavioral and nonverbal cues in body language and tone that we both produce and perceive from others has an influence on us. Influence is all around us. It's happening all the time. And in this particular program, we're going to focus on our ability to be influential in a deliberate way in those one-on-one interpersonal interactions we all have. It's defined in the Oxford English Dictionary as the capacity to have an effect on the character development or behavior of someone or something. You know, it's just nice to have that definition because I think it clarifies what's apparent in terms of influence. We can see whether we're influential or not. Are those around us acting and thinking differently, or are they acting and thinking as they were before we attempted to influence them? That's a good measure of our own effectiveness in influence. It's also important to think about influence as it pertains to communication in a variety of media and formats. We can think about the speeches and presentations that we see. That's an attempt to influence from one to many. For a good resource in looking at how you can be more effective in your own speeches and presentations, you ought to check out Monroe's Motivated Sequence. And then there's the influence that occurs on a daily basis when we as consumers are influenced by those who wish us to purchase products or even consume ideas. And that's the influence of marketing. For more information about how effective marketing takes place in influence, consider looking for Cialdini's influence principles. And finally, there's the influence in one-on-one conversations, the interpersonal domain. That's where we'll focus our time and attention. And as we think about that area, there are three important factors to consider: who we want to influence, what we're trying to influence, and how we're trying to influence that. The who, we're pretty good at. We know who it is that has control of assets or the ability to influence decisions, or the people that we want to behave in particular ways. Oftentimes we're less clear in a precise way, what are we trying to influence? And so we'd like to spend a little bit of time thinking about what is the outcome of the influence that you seek. But mostly we want to focus on how. How are you trying to influence others around you? And that has to do with your own styles and behaviors. That's where we'll spend the time in this program. So being successful at influence means at some level, and over time, you'll begin to see people around you giving access to or sharing resources and connections with you. Maybe you'll find them giving you more of their time and attention, or allowing you to have time and attention of those around them. Maybe they'll simply give you approval for what you want to do, and that might be enough. Or it might be control over the decision and decision rights that is about to be made. Maybe what you're trying to do is seek alignment with them, and that they align with you on the direction you're headed. In some cases, it'll be how can you have them take action and behave differently. And then in some areas, you're simply trying to broaden their perspective, shift their thinking, and influence how they perceive the things around them. In this program, we'll use the ISI survey. You should have completed that by now, and if you haven't, contact your program facilitator in order to find out how to do that. But we'll also be using targeted skills practice that will help build your ability to recognize and diagnose the influence situations that you're in and the style you and others are using. We want you to increase the range of styles that you have available to you and increase the range and effectiveness of the specific behaviors you use within styles in your one-on-one interaction. Practice will be essential in improving your influence success. It is essential because behavioral change does not occur through knowledge transfer, but it really requires engaging in action learning. It will require that you do reflect on the results of your action and be deliberate about how to incorporate learning into future action as you think about being influential. We also know that influence is not linear. It's often a complex, iterative process. But we think with practice and preparation, you can become a more effective learner, influencer. When we think about being successful in influencing others, there's also an aspect that's really important to take into account, which is the role of power. And there are three ways that seem to play out as it pertains to power in how people are influenced in organizations. Of course, there's power that comes from authority. And authority is granted by the organization or a formal body. When power is granted, it gives an individual certain rights and control over resources, decisions, staffing, etc. It's important to recognize that this power is only granted by an organization or formal body, and it can be taken away by that organization or formal body. Status is another power. This is generated from a different source. Power from status is socially derived. It's derived in the community in which you find yourself. And it has to do with the degree of respect and trust that is granted by those within a community to the individual. Status power cannot be given by the organization or a formal body. It is always generated sort of with the consent of those inside a community. This aspect of trust and respect is critical in status power. And people who are effective are tuned into how they impact the level of trust in terms of their application of power. And lastly, there's a certain kind of power that's generated in conversational skills. And that has to do with understanding and working with the human nature and the tendencies that we all have and in conversation working with that human nature and those tendencies instead of against it. So in this program, we want to increase your ability to use a wider range of influence styles and use those styles more effectively with those whom you're attempting to influence. In each module, we'll have a specific focus. This is Module 1, with simply an introduction to the influence program. In Module 2, we want to give you a sense of what is the influence styles inventory model, even before you look at your results. In Module 3, we'll look at the results from your individual survey and begin to work on how can you expand your repertoire as it pertains to your influence style. In Module 4, we want you to practice specific influence behaviors and report on those. And then in Module 5, come back to the notion of who do you want to influence, what is the influence result you seek, and then how are you going to go about doing that. Lastly, this program is designed to help you change your behavior, but to be effective, you do need to be engaged in learning. And there are some points to consider as you move into this program.